Okay, that's weird. It kind of looked like my feed cut out, so I'm going to try this again. Welcome to Stronghouse Coaching. I'm Coach Victoria. If you are just joining me, I take the guesswork out of exercise and wellness for... Oh my god. Alright. Okay, so it's a little bit windy today. Stronghouse Coaching. I am... Okay, last attempt here, and if it doesn't work, then I'm going to have to do this again another time, or give it another shot. Welcome to Stronghouse Coaching. I am Coach Victoria. I take the guesswork out of exercise and wellness for busy professionals so they can feel amazing and have more time and energy to focus on what matters most to them. Thank you for joining me today on this windy and sunny day. This is my very first Facebook Live. If you've been following me for a little while, you might have seen my Instagram Lives, but this is my first time going live on Facebook, and what I'm doing is doing an exercise clinic, which I'll be doing the last Monday of every month at noon. So next month will be April 26th, I think. And I'm going to be taking one fundamental exercise and breaking it down. So I will be talking about the purpose of the exercise, like how it applies functionally in real life situations, the main muscle groups that are worked in that exercise, the proper technique for the exercise for beginner and intermediate exercisers, not advanced level exercisers. If you've been exercising, going to the gym for several years, this is not going to be a platform that is dedicated to you. This is for people who are complete novices to the gym, or who've been going to the gym for maybe a couple of years on and off and want to refine their exercise technique with basic exercises. I'm also going to be going through common mistakes with each exercise, and some regressions, like how to make the exercise easier, and progressions, how to make the exercise a little bit more challenging. So today I am tackling my favorite exercise, or one of my favorites, deadlifts. And the reason it is my favorite exercise, well, there are two reasons. First one is it is a big bang exercise. It targets so many muscle groups, and it is such a functional exercise. We do the movement so many times in the course of a day we don't even realize it. And also it is the exercise, the lift where I am strongest. So yes, there is a little bit of ego playing into that. So I will get right to it. The purpose of a deadlift, plain and simple, is to safely pick things up and put them down. So I'm just going to re-angle this. I think, we lost the angle a little bit when the tripod fell down. So hopefully it doesn't do that again. So plain and simple, picking something up safely and putting it back down. And ideally not doing it on an uneven surface like stones and grass. Now, think about how many times a day you pick stuff up and put it down. You're essentially doing a deadlift as long as you're maintaining a neutral spine. So if you're rounding your back, not really a deadlift, but it is still a bend pattern, which is what the deadlift is. And that is why it is a fundamental movement. So I'm going to teach you today how to do that safely with pretty much any kind of weight. The muscle groups it works primarily: hamstrings, so the backs of your thighs, your butt muscles, pretty much all of your butt muscles, primarily gluteus maximus. It also works low back, it works your mid back, it works your latissimus dorsi. When you see bodybuilders and they've got these really big, like, wingy type muscles, that's your latissimus. And your traps, upper traps, mid traps, and if we go a little bit lower back down to the mid back, your lower traps. So it works most of the back of your body, and if you're lifting a heavy enough weight, it also works your forearms. It really, really trains your grip strength. So as far as I'm going to go through the common mistakes before I get to the proper technique, because there really are only two common mistakes with the deadlift, and it is rounding of the back and arching of the neck. Now there's a little bit of debate as to the neck thing, whether or not it's correct to keep a neutral neck like so when you're lifting or to look up. When you are just starting out, when you are learning the deadlift, I always recommend a neutral neck so you're not putting a lot of pressure on your cervical and upper thoracic spine. Now, I'm going to have to take my hoodie off to do this. It's still pretty brisk out, so I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. We'll see how that works out. Okay, so proper technique for a deadlift boils down to having a neutral spine, and that means maintaining the natural curves of your spine and not letting it bend as you go through the movement, and achieving a proper bend pattern. So a lot of people think of a deadlift as going down and coming back up. I like to teach it as going back and forward because the movement initiates from the hips, not the waist, not the knees, but the hips. So this is how I coach it for most of my clients, especially when I'm teaching them for the first time. You're going to stand for just a standard deadlift with your feet about hip to shoulder width apart. There is another type of deadlift where you go a little bit wider. It's called a sumo deadlift, but I'm not going to get into that today. That is a variation, and that is typically for more advanced lifters. So, feet are hip to shoulder width apart, and you want to have your core engaged. And that doesn't mean tightening your abs as much as you can. It just means drawing your belly button gently to your spine so that you feel a little bit of tension through your back and your deeper abdominal muscles. Now, to start the movement, you are going to shift your weight a little bit back onto your heels, push your butt back, bend your knees and bend your hips, and come back up. And this is just a body weight deadlift. I'll get into the breathing for a weighted deadlift shortly and the extra technique for a weighted deadlift. But I'll go through it again a few times. So your feet are about hip to shoulder width apart. They can be slightly turned out, that's fine. And you're going to take a deep breath in. Draw your belly button in towards your spine, butt goes back, and coming back up. I see somebody asked a question here. Unfortunately, because I'm on my phone, I can't see it, so I will get to the questions after I've ended the video. Hopefully I can figure out how to do that. This is a little bit different from Instagram, so please bear with me, and thank you for showing up and doing that. And I'll get to the questions at the end. So, going back to the technique, feet hip to shoulder width apart. You take a deep breath in, belly button draws in so your core is a little bit engaged. We're not looking for full tightness here. And then your weight shifts a little bit back onto your heels. Feet stay flat on the floor though, and spine stays neutral. Now, when people have a hard time maintaining a neutral spine, I give them the stick, which is also the carrot, if you're familiar with that metaphor. So the stick helps with, and you can use a regular broomstick for this too, it helps to maintain a neutral spine because you're going to have 3 points of contact on your body with the stick, the back of your head, between your shoulder blades, and right on your tailbone, with a little bit of space between your low back and the stick. And you want to maintain those 3 points of contact as well as that space the entire time. So as I bend my hips, you can see I'm not losing, hang on a sec, there we go, I'm not losing that space and I'm not losing the 3 points of contact. What usually happens when people are first starting out is they bend the low back, they don't realize it, because it feels like they've still got the stick on the tailbone. It's not, it's on the low back now. And so you see the gap is closing here, and I'm getting some flexion in my low back, and that means that my low back is going to end up doing some of the lifting, which is not what we want. The low back works to stabilize your entire core in the deadlift movement. So I will go through that again. We've got the 3 points of contact, back of the head, between the shoulder blades, on the tailbone, a little bit of space here. You take a deep breath in, belly button draws into the spine, butt goes back, knees bend, and you come back up. Now, when you're using weight, let's pretend this is a barbell, you have to get your lats involved as well. So what you're going to do is pull the bar or the weight as close to you as possible, squeeze your armpits, and there you've got your lats engaged. They're nice and tight, and it's the same movement, only you're keeping the weight as close to you as possible. Now, as for breathing, there are a couple of different ways you can breathe if you're not using weight. If you're just doing a body weight deadlift, then what I always recommend is what's called anatomical breathing, where you exhale as your body closes and you inhale as it opens up. So if I'm doing a top-down deadlift, I'm going to exhale as I bend and inhale as I straighten. Exhale and then inhale. But if I'm doing a weighted deadlift, even if it's just a moderate weight, then what I want to do, so I'm going to start from the bottom now. I'm going to take a deep breath in before I start, draw my belly button in. I'm going to get all my muscles fired up, so my lats are working, my armpits are tight, my butt is tight, my weight is on my heels, and I'm going to exhale as I stand up, take another breath in, hold on the way down, exhale, breathe in, hold. Now, I'm going to take a break for a second just to warm back up a little bit. That is essentially the technique for a proper deadlift outside of doing your 1 rep max, or outside of doing heavy lifting. So I'm just talking about light weights and moderate weights, and that's relative to everybody. I'm not talking about people who are training for performance or strength. That is entirely different. The breathing is a little bit different too. Actually, it's kind of a lot different. So just for beginners and intermediate lifters, as I mentioned before. Now, as you can see, there are different types of equipment that you can use for deadlifts, but the movement boils down to the same thing, regardless of whether you're using a barbell or kettlebell or a pair of kettlebells or dumbbells or anything else that you might want to lift. It's the same movement, just different things that you're picking up and putting down. So I just showed you one regression, and that's using the stick. I'm going to show you, tripod is not that effective at staying up, so we'll see how we do. But hopefully another gust of wind won't take it down. Does not help that the stone that it's on is not entirely level. Okay, so the other regression for a deadlift is a kneeling deadlift. Now, there are other exercises that you can do to help prep your body for a deadlift. The one I like to do is hip bridges, but this is the same as a deadlift movement, just regressing it a little bit by bringing you down to your knees. So we're taking the knees essentially out of the equation for now. And it's the same thing. Driving the hips back, keeping the spine neutral, and coming back up. Driving the hips back, and hips come forward. And this is to help just make it a little bit simpler for people to learn the deadlift movement. Now, as far as progressions, there are quite a few. I'm not going to go through all of them, just the most common ones. Now, the most obvious one is just adding more weight. So you get comfortable with the deadlift, you want to get a little bit stronger, put some more weight on the bar, or get heavier kettlebell, heavier dumbbells, or what have you. But there are a few other progressions. So barbell deadlifts and kettlebell deadlifts, single kettlebell deadlifts, are, I think, the easiest ones to do with weight because it's easiest to control the weight. But when you get into single kettlebells and dumbbells, it gets a little bit harder. And the reason for that, with a kettlebell or barbell, the weight is either in your hand or under your hand. With a dumbbell, the weight is actually on either side of your hand, so it's a little bit harder to hold. So a couple of progressions you can do just by switching up the weight or how you're holding it are single kettlebell deadlifts, under the body, right? And this makes it a little bit harder because the kettlebell is kind of pulling you into rotation and you have to work against that. You can also do single kettlebell or dumbbell suitcase deadlift, in which case the weight is also pulling you to the side. So again, harder to control and it's farther from your body. And you can also do, this gets even more challenging, a couple of single leg versions of the deadlift. So the first one I like to progress to is called a kickstand deadlift, where you have your back leg on the ground, but it's just there for a little bit of support. And the goal here is, I'll show you from the front, the goal here is to not let your hip shift. And this is a little bit harder for women because we have wider hips. My goal right now is to keep my hip lined up with my knee, lined up with my ankle as I shift my weight back. So it's a little bit tricky, but it's really great for working hip stabilizers and rotators deep in the hip and the side of the hip. Now you can progress that even more by doing a straight up single leg deadlift. Now my balance on my right leg is not as good as my left, but the idea here is the same as the kickstand deadlift, where I'm trying to keep my hip lined up with my knee, lined up with my foot. So there you have it. You've got a few progressions for your deadlifts and a couple of regressions. And you've also got the basics of the technique and common mistakes and the purpose of the deadlift. So I thank you very much for joining me here today. I will get to the questions as soon as I get back to my computer to answer them, because right now I'm filming this from my phone. Thank you again for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow on Instagram at 8 p.m. to talk about eggs and chocolate, the health benefits and myths of those foods. And I will see you on Facebook live next month, April 26th at noon, to break down push-ups. Hopefully it'll be a little bit warmer and a little bit less windy. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you.